Hello and welcome to Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I've been meditating for about 20 years in the Buddhist tradition and the Taoist tradition, another six. And as best I can, I'm here to help you train in meditation in the real world. This is the mission, such as it is. So, who's here so far? We have Ty. Hey, Ty. Good to see you. Who else? Who else? Who else? Jay is in the room. Lovely, lovely. Let me see. Studio mode. There it is. Perfect. Hello, Wombat's in the room. Okay, yeah, looks like we have the whole crew here tonight. John Jedi, haven't seen you in a bit. Welcome. Well, it has been a very interesting 24 hours. We every Sunday. Hey, you're Yeze. Every Sunday, my main teacher here in Edinburgh has a Tai Chi class, and then every third Sunday, which it is, right? Yeah, every third Sunday we do meditation training after the class, based in the Taoist tradition, and um, it's quite interesting because there are such profound parallels between what they're doing from the Taoist side and what they're doing on the Buddhist side, and in particular, parallels between the Taoist approach in general and Buddhist Tantra. Um, that being said, what I find quite fascinating is that the Taoists have taken a sort of course, there's a bit of a revelatory approach to all of this stuff, right? Because we trust that the great masters have done something that we don't yet have the capability to do, and so in that way, it's a bit revelatory, at least from the point of view that they know something that we don't know. On the other hand, um, what the Taoists have taken a much more, how to say, a much more direct approach to is self experimentation. So within their communities, they've just looked at stuff that happens when you train and then tried to enhance those things or add to them, or so for example, sometimes when you sit you find that you'll have particular types of movement that occur spontaneously in the body while you're sitting if you sit for a long time. And so some of the Taoist exercises for making your body better for meditation come out of the natural movements your body makes to try to adjust itself to make itself comfortable for meditation, which is quite interesting, right? It's quite intelligent to work with yourself in that way. In any case, the what we would call the active practices, where you're doing something quite deliberately, intentionally, with mental force of some kind, live on one side of the spectrum in Taoist practice, as they do in Buddhist practice. And then on the other end, there are practices where you're just placing the body into position and then doing nothing at all, much like Chan practice and Zen practice and so on and so forth. So these clearly live in the same family of practices. So today we were doing that end of the spectrum, the far end of the spectrum of just sitting and letting everything else go. It's quite interesting. Quite interesting indeed. Anyways, I'm just rambling because there are no questions in the chat, as I want to do. But please do, if you have questions, pop them into the chat and I'll answer as best I can. So, for those who are interested in mm, really, all sorts of stuff, right? Where you're not simply interested in the Buddhist approach or what have you, where maybe you have a slightly more eclectic interest, as it seems some of the people that I attract are like this. Maybe it's because of how I am. But uh, again, the some of the stuff, for lack of a better term, let's call it the technology that's there for training and meditation that comes over from the Taoist traditions, very smart, because people were much like the Buddhists. They were trying to figure out, okay, I'm trying to sit here for 4 hours and do something with my mind. How do I get my body to cooperate with me doing something that's relatively physically demanding? To sit perfectly still for 4 hours is sounds quite easy, but as anyone knows who's done more than 30 minutes of meditation, it's quite a big challenge to get your body to cooperate with you if you want to sit a long time. And so the Taoists have developed huge numbers of ancillary exercises here and there that, for historical reasons, then, as far as I can tell, came to be shared with the Shaolin Buddhist lineage. They just exchanged culturally and religiously huge amounts of information that were helpful for meditation. And so, hence, once again, why you find something like 18 Lohan being so rich with resources to make the body and the mind and so on and so forth function better for your practice. Yeah, yeah. So I was talking with my teacher a bit about this today because some of the body scanning practices that I do in the way that I teach them, I don't talk about this much, as you guys know, but part of the reason that I teach them the way that I do is that if you train your awareness to be able to move through the body in a certain way, then you're prepared if you wanted to make the body do something as the awareness is going through. You're very well prepared for that. So you're able to take, how to say, you're able to take this type of practice where you're just soaking the awareness into your tissues. For those of you who were here yesterday, I hope some of you had the experience that it wasn't just me kind of talking, you know. If you didn't, it's okay. But I hope some of you had the experience where you could actually feel where your lungs are and you could actually feel where your heart is. So there are there are practices where you're basically learning how to soak the mind into different parts of the body, and then once it's in there, then you can do stuff with those parts of the body because you're in there. And so the way that I teach body scanning meditation when it's full on, and I don't think in this class I've ever gone as detailed as I can. You know, I think full detail would be like 90 minutes or something. But we've done, I think, 35 minutes or so, which is fairly detailed. In any case, one of the things that we do, for example, is after finishing the body scan going to the head, oftentimes I run down the spine, right? So run down the spine back to the belly, for example. And if you can do that mentally where you're actually getting the mind to go through the spine, then you have the option later on when you're doing practices that are related to the spine, or here's the spine, just inside the spine, not even in the tissue there, but just sort of running through the center of the body, um, is what's called the central channel. And according to both Buddhism and Taoism, and I think also the Hindu Tantras and the Jains and so on and so forth, and the Sikhs, from what I found out recently. You know, you can use this aspect of your, for lack of a better term, kind of subtle physiology to create mental effects. And whether or not you believe there is a real subtle physical physiology or not isn't actually the point. When you look at people who do stuff with whatever it is you can access with your tactile awareness, inside those things, it generates real physical effects and real mental effects in the person doing the practice, which is the point, right? So in the end, you don't even have to believe that you have a subtle body or chakras, or you don't have to believe in prana and kundalini and all this stuff. If you do the practices and you do what's being described, then the stuff that's being described will happen if you do enough of the practice. Right? And in a sense, that's good enough. Okay. Yeah, message came over from Discord. Somebody's asking if I can teach them about the Force, which is pretty funny. Just as a sidebar before I get into the questions, George Lucas, when he was writing Star Wars, based a lot of Star Wars lore on Zen practice and basically on Buddhist spirituality. So, this idea of a force that is part of what makes things alive, that you can do stuff with, actually does come over from these systems. It's called wind, or it's called prana, or it's called Jing, Qi, and Shen, depending on which system you're in. And then within the Tibetan system, there are a whole bunch of different kinds of winds that are there in the system. And again, almost rather in this way, almost rather whether or not you believe those are there actually isn't the point. As I said, it's the fact that in your tactile awareness, no, I wouldn't say that. In your tactile awareness, you can find that there are sort of these substances that seem to be there that you can mentally grab onto and you can move around and do stuff with them. And if you do that, things happen in your body. That's the point. Now, whether or not those substances are real things is secondary. I've, with some of my teachers, been convinced they are real things and not just psychological things that sort of seem like that, for lack of a better term, right? But um, but in the end, it's sort of all the way up really to a relatively advanced level of capability. It doesn't matter if you believe they're real or not. If you look inside, you find these things that are there, and if you move them around, stuff actually happens. Which is the point. And we have pretty good data now on people who do Tumo, for example, inner fire meditation. They've studied that at some length, and they've studied Qigong people at some length. And we know that if you do these practices where you're working with these things, that at least experientially or somatically, they'll say sometimes phenomenologically appear to be there. If you work with these things, real things happen. So, um, okay, let me get into the questions. Yes, if you'd like to, in short, if you'd like to work with the Force, you can learn how to do that through these practices, because that's what George Lucas was basing it on. Now, whether you're going to be able to do what they do in the movies is another question entirely, and I think probably not. Okay, so questions coming in. Why do you place your legs on top of each other? I can't get into that stacked stance. So your posture besides your spine and your neck, your posture for a long time doesn't matter that much. You have to think about it like this. Great practitioners did their best to leave you a set of stuff that will add 2% here, 3% there, 5% over here, etc., so that the whole thing becomes easier and better at every stage. Now, if you're raised in a particular setting, for example, in some places in Asia, you sit with your feet underneath you like this from the time you're a child, right? And if you look at their monastic traditions, some of the monks do their meditation in this posture because that's what their legs are used to. It's comfortable for them. Likewise, I think it would be relatively common to sit with your legs in that folded position when you're sitting and talking. If you lived in a culture where you sat on the ground on cushions, this would have been one of the very natural postures to sit in. So for us, well, not us, I'm not sure where you live, John, but for me, as a Western person who's raised where you sit with your legs hanging over a chair most of the time, it took me years to be comfortable sitting with my legs like this. Years. But eventually it happens. How much benefit is there? I mean, the main benefit is that the body feels stable because as the concentration gets better, your mind pulls away in terms of attentional bandwidth, in terms of the amount of awareness that's there in your proprioception and so on and so forth, holding your body in place. You're pulling that awareness out to do something else. And as you do that, if the body's not in a stable position, it'll start to fall over, and then you lose your object of meditation. And this will happen too. This happens to a lot of people. For example, if you're you're starting to meditate, and I'll really exaggerate having my chest up so you can see it better with this on here, right? So you have your chest sort of whatever, and you're sitting there and you're trying to meditate. And then as the concentration gets a little better, you go like this, because the mind is starting to pull attention away from the body and towards the object of meditation. And as it pulls it out of the body and towards the object of meditation, unless the body's really stable, it starts to collapse. So once again, the geniuses, so to speak, not so to speak, I think the actual geniuses of this stuff sorted out that if you can make the body arranged in a certain way through muscle tendon changing, through bone marrow washing, through filling the lower field with inter-abdominal pressure that holds the whole system upright even when you're not trying to do anything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you do a whole bunch of stuff that makes the body really basically perfectly arranged for sitting in long sessions of meditation, then it's easier to sit in long sessions of meditation. Ta-da! Right. So there's that aspect. The other aspect is for us sort of beginners and semi-beginners or wherever we happen to be, the key point is that your spine needs to be relatively straight, not super artificially uncomfortably straight, but if this is the natural curve of the spine, let's say, you basically bring it to here, right? And then the sort of, let's call it the stretchiness, the elasticity of the connective tissue of the spine ends up being the thing that that your weight is sort of resting on, that little bit of stretchy feeling. And that allows you to sit very comfortably once you get used to it. It'll allow you to sit comfortably for a long period of time. So, oh, thank you, Purple. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. I will say this, Purple, and for anyone else who'd like to chip in, um, if you use the links down below, so for example, Purple sent in $10, and I think Purple's intent was probably that I get that money, right? But Purple, if for example you sent that on an iPhone, they take 30%. And then YouTube takes another 30%, which means that only four of those dollars would come to me. Which means that six of your hard-earned dollars went to two different tech companies, which I'm sure you're not happy about. I don't mind. It's a good thing to do to support all of these, you know, all of these companies that make all this stuff possible. At the same time, if you wanted to donate directly to me, yeah. If you, I figured. If you wanted to donate directly to me, down below you'll find PayPal, Venmo. On GoFundMe, you can slide the slider down to a very small percentage going to GoFundMe, etc. And those are good ways to do it if you wanted to make sure it all arrives to me. Okay. Um, long story short, John. Sorry, I know I'm rambling on a bit, but long story short, the key point actually, especially in the beginning, is just make sure your legs are comfortable. Make sure your arms are comfortable. If you can't stack them, don't. Put them this way, or put them with one leg out, or sit on your couch and have your legs splayed out. You're like, it doesn't actually matter that much in the beginning, as long as your spine has that relatively straight orientation, and as long as it's comfortable enough to sit for whatever period of time you're actually sitting. Does that make sense? Because if the body is not a distraction, then you can put more of your attention on what you're doing. But if there's pain, or if you have to use a lot of attention to micromanage your posture because it's uncomfortable and you're about to fall over or whatever, this is now a problem. You see what I mean? Looks like my computer's spazzing out a little bit. Okay. Let me just wait a moment for my internet to stop being absurd. So laying down is generally not the best in the beginning, because if you start getting even a little bit of concentration, you'll fall asleep. So in the beginning, if you start to get just a little bit of concentration, the mind starts to get a little bit stable, then it starts to get dull and you'll fall asleep. So laying down is not the best. If you can sit up in a posture that's comfortable, or in the beginning it'll be more difficult to get a deeper concentration, but there are benefits to doing it standing, especially as a layperson in the real world. If you're not a monk or a nun, more or less doing hours of practice a day, or you're not living in retreat, etc. If you're living in the real world, being able to get your practice off your cushion into a standing position, into a walking position, etc., as early as you can, huge benefits. So this is why I transition people pretty early to that way of doing it, amongst a number of other reasons. Okay, what are the best kinds of meditation for subduing a bad temper? Purple. Great question. Great question. So, in terms of anger, in the way that I teach people, I put this over in what I call Foundation Five. So, Foundation One is being able to get your mind to go where you want it to go and stay there for a short time. If you can't do that, then nothing else in meditation is going to work. So the first foundational cognitive skill is being able to place your mind where you want and then keep it where you intended it to be. The next foundational skill is, if you're living in the real world, you need to be able to take your practice off the cushion and into the real world. So we move to a standing position. And now we're going to deepen the concentration. So now that it's relatively stable, we need the mind to start getting deeper. So, foundation two is a standing meditation where you're doing body scanning. Body scanning, proven over and over and over again to be one of the most effective ways to make your mind extremely calm. And then we move to walking for the same reason that you're learning how to take your practice off the cushion. Foundation four, then you're learning how to actually access your five external senses as objects of meditation, which sounds a little strange, but we'll get to it in due time. And then finally, once you have some control over the five external senses, you can pull the attention inward towards consciousness itself. If these are too out of control, the mind gets pulled outward into the senses. So you need to tame the senses a little bit, which will help a bit with anger. Hey, Ty. So it'll help a little bit with anger because the mind will be a little bit more tamed with regards to the external stimulus. But what will really help is if you can pull the attention in towards actual consciousness, and then you can start doing stuff with consciousness. Now, you could have started doing stuff with consciousness well before this, and a lot of systems basically do that, where you read things, you think about things, et cetera, et cetera. Every religion has stuff like that, where you're basically thinking stuff through to try to change your character. However, it's not very powerful if you don't have the ability to access consciousness and what consciousness is, because consciousness is a formless object, which again probably sounds a little strange, but think about it like this. Imagine for a moment, let's do it with a visualized image just as a thought experiment, okay? So imagine for a moment you're visualizing an apple, as I'm wont to do, right? You're visualizing an apple in front of you. Now imagine that your eyes turned off for a second, right? Imagine your eyes turned completely off, but you could still mentally visualize and see this apple with your mind, right? As a visualized image. And then your ears turned off. And then your nose turned off. And then your tongue turned off. And then your tactile awareness also turned off. What's left in terms of your experience? What is the mind like that's now visualizing this apple? Because it's not, from its own perspective, it's not in a particular location in space, because you turned off all of the apparatus that experience you as being in a particular location in space, didn't you? Because your tongue, I mean, actually, if you look closely, it doesn't look this way either with your external senses, but let's ignore that for a second. You have certainly, if you've turned off the five external senses, you have your mind now is sort of floating in the mental space that isn't quite the same as having your body located in a particular place in your room, and you kind of know what your body is doing and where it is and how it's oriented, because this is how our nervous system is set up. All of that information is gone. So what is that experience like of the visualized image and the mind knowing that image being the only two things that exist for the period of time that you're in that concentrated state? Well, if you think about it, it should be that your mind then seems to sort of be in a state where it's formless. It's not in any particular location. In reference to its own experience, it doesn't seem like it's in any particular place, right? So this is part of the reason, and you can get to it with reason, which I really love. But this is part of the reason that you can sort out pretty easily, actually, that consciousness is a formless object. It's not the five external senses, right? Okay. So if you were trying to cultivate patience, let's say, the antidote to anger, you would do rumination, thinking things through. For example, thinking through the fact that, isn't it true, Purple? Isn't it true that when you get frustrated with difficult things, it stops you from accomplishing meaningful things that you wanted to accomplish? I don't know what your thing is, but maybe in your career, you get frustrated. Maybe in your romantic relationships, you get frustrated. Maybe in your training in martial arts or training in dance or training at the gym, you get frustrated. And then the frustration stops you from doing the thing that you intended to do that would have had great meaning or purpose or value to you. You see it? So one of the things you can do is you can think about that over and over and over again. Wow, you know what? Anger is like this thing that's this frustration with difficult things. That frustration is an enemy of mine because it's stopping me from getting the stuff I want in a totally conventional sense. If I didn't have that in my mind, or at least at a minimum, when it came up, if I didn't chase it and that it's taking me somewhere, believe that it's taking me somewhere I want to go, right? This is what we normally do. We go, oh, I'm too frustrated to do this. I'm going to go take a break. And then we never come back. Or it's too late. We already screwed it up with the frustration and anger. So if you think this through, you start to realize actually this frustration is really, it's worse than my enemies, you know? Even people that don't like me wouldn't stop me from gaining everything of value, wouldn't screw up my romantic relationships, wouldn't make me miss opportunities at work in the way that anger and frustration do, wouldn't delay advancing in my career because I don't have the whatever it is that allows you to do the hard work of getting ahead in the real world, et cetera, right? So when you think about this, frustration, anger is like a horrifically terrible enemy that lives right here on your doorstep. And if you think about it again and again and again, then when that anger and frustration starts to come up, you go, oh, I know who you are. I recognize you. You're not my friend. You're that guy who comes in here when things are going bad and convinces me to not to do things that are meaningful and valuable and important, or convinces me to do really stupid stuff that hurts all the things I care about. I'm not going to listen to you. Get out of here. Right? Like if it was a person and you saw them, you would go, get out of here. Every time you come around, you convince me to do stupid stuff that hurts me or hurts people I care about or stops me from doing stuff that's meaningful and important. Get out of here. I don't want to I don't want you around anymore. You know what I mean? So like this, first you start with the fact that anger has so many downsides and the frustration has so many downsides. And so this is called contemplating the faults of anger. So this is one of the contemplations of half a dozen that are quite good that start the process of you not chasing your anger and then replacing it with something else. right? Okay. So think about it like this now. If you generated the mind into an attitude, if this gets too weird or complicated, let me know. But think about it like this. If you generated the mind itself into a new attitude, which is this, I see how many faults anger has. And that's your new attitude. When I see this anger come up, I'm not going to chase it. That would be absolutely idiotic. So you have great resolve to not chase anger when it comes up. Does that make sense? And this is the new attitude that you have. Exactly like visualizing that apple. Well, not exactly, but pretty close to visualizing that apple. If you use that new attitude as an object of concentration with enough force, your hearing would turn off, your vision would turn off, smell would turn off, taste would turn off, tactile sensation would turn off, and you would be abiding in a formless state where the only thing that exists is your mind in an attitude that you're cultivating to overcome your anger problem. That's a pretty sophisticated type of mind training and concentration, right? It's a pretty demanding if you want to do it full on. Just before that, you could generate this mental state until it sort of fills up your body in the same way that if you thought about for a few minutes something that really makes you pissed off and angry, it sort of gets the body going, right? You go, oh man, like I'm going to pick something up and throw it in a second. This is insane. I can't believe this. Then you start raising the voice, right? The voice comes up. So like this, when the mental state there is mental state of anger is there, then it sort of takes over the whole system. And so then the voice changes, the face changes, the body changes, the gestures change, right? The expression on the face changes. So when the anger is there, it takes over the whole physical system also. So likewise, if you generate an attitude of resolve, I am deeply resolved to not do this stupid shit anymore. If this anger thing comes up again, I am not chasing that. So, like this, if you do that, it'll take over the whole body system until just like being outraged at something, but this is not making yourself angry, right? You're not getting angry at anger. That's not the point. But the resolve, the feeling of resolve comes to fill up your entire system until you literally feel it in your fingertips, in your toes, in the top of your head, all over your skin, just like being completely outraged. Or, since it just came up at the bottom of the chat, when you're really lusting, like when you're really lusting after whatever it is that you really like in terms of the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever you like, right? When you're really lusting and you feel it everywhere, right? You feel it on your skin, you feel it in your face, you feel it in here somewhere, you feel it all over. And it sort of like takes you over. So like this, you can use the same process of ruminating, thinking it through, looking at evidence, looking at reasons to cultivate a different attitude. And then when that attitude comes up, you hold it with concentration. What does that depend upon, that concentration? The profundity or transformative power of that concentration depends upon, can you access consciousness? Can you control the content on the surface of your mind or not? If you can't control the content on the surface of your mind, how are you going to change the attitude that's there? If you can't access consciousness, how are you going to abide at the end of the meditation, if you're so inclined, in a state of formless concentration on the new attitude you've generated with great force, right? So I think there's a benefit to putting rumination, even though you could do it now and it would be powerful and worth doing. There's benefit to putting it after you have a few more capabilities. There's benefit to putting it a little bit later, and not that much later. Like if you were doing my stuff full on, you should be able to start doing that kind of thing within 6 months or a year. You know, Uh, this stuff actually works and it comes on quickly, and it's not like a slow, mysterious process. It's a very logical step-by-step process, which is actually kind of horrifying because now you have to take responsibility for all your nonsense for the first time. Okay. I hope that helps. So that's how you would do that. If you want some more resources on anger and you want to do some ruminations now, which will help, I'm not saying they won't help. You can do rumination anytime. Go to the Discord under resources, Buddhist resources. There are two books: the Bodhisattva Karya Avatara, the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and it's called the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And then there's a commentary on that right below that link, um, by one of the great people in my main tradition. No need to get into who he is, but very, very great practitioner. And if you go to the chapter on the perfection of patience, then you'll see there's a lot of ruminations there. There's a lot of sort of arguments there, and it's not meant for you to just read through and then go, "Oh yeah, I agree." It's meant for you to work with yourself until those attitudes come up, and then you hold them with concentration. Then you think it through again, bring it up again, think it through again, bring it up again until the mind is different and the attitude is different, which could take months or years. Okay. Questions. I wonder if I can claim Jedism as brothers and sisters. It's an actually recognized. Yeah, in Scotland, you can become a religious Jedi if you are an idiot. It's true. It's true. You too can become an absolute wanker. Okay. How were advanced meditation techniques discovered? I don't know that we know. We don't really have I mean, if you believe the great saints, then people are reborn with great predisposition from past lifetimes or this or that reason, uh, more or less coming from capabilities from the past. So they have already done this sort of thing many, many times, and then they reinstitute it for other people's sake when they take rebirth here. If you'd like my sort of pet idea that's a bit more naturalistic, but I don't think these two are exclusive. I think they are mutually supportive, not exclusive. Think about this for a second. If you were talking to a great yogi and he said, "Listen, the best thing to do is go to a cave somewhere in nature where it's not been too disturbed by human activity, where there's enough food and there's fresh water and things are calm, right? And where mostly all you need to do is sit and and just be aware and do your practices, blah blah blah, right?" Doesn't that sound strangely like all of human history until about 5,000 years ago? Do you know what I mean? I mean, of course, they were hunting and they were doing other stuff, but those people would have spent huge amounts of time once they had collected enough food and this and that, just sitting at the edge of the cave, just sort of looking at things. And they're in relatively undisturbed nature with, at various times, plenty of food and so on and so forth. In caves, out in nature, right in the middle of everything. It doesn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me at all if some of these capabilities were discovered naturally also by human beings as we have gone through various stages of arriving where we are now in terms of sophistication as beings. Okay, let's see. Ruminating on how you are tired would make you more tired. I don't know. The best technique for falling asleep if you're having sleep trouble is body scanning meditation. And I would recommend if you're using it to fall asleep, start from the top of the head and go down towards your feet rather than coming up. Coming up tends to make the mind a little bit more fresh. Get over the fear of talking to girls. That's an interesting question. You know, I think a more general answer that is equally interesting and important is this: um, these practices in general should make you more comfortable, more competent, more able to handle real life situations, more self assured. And I'm not saying that you do all of that because you're trying to become attractive to whatever kind of people you like. But generally speaking, people do like people who are competent, people who are self assured, people who are able to navigate relatively complex social situations. Those people tend to be more popular and more successful when dating. You know, like when you think about men or women who you admire, there's a really interesting, what's his name, hold on, what's his name, cast of Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy has a really interesting interview that he gave once, and I've done a fair amount of theater and improv and other things growing up, and have loved the arts for most of my life. And so I was watching him give this interview about some of the tricks that he uses when acting. And one of the tricks that he uses, he said, is if you want to take up space basically on the screen, even if you're not saying anything, what you do is you're very still. And that stillness is power. It speaks to self-confidence. It speaks to I'm I'm sort of within myself, how to say, the situation is revolving around me. I'm not revolving around the situation, right? Because I'm in control of what I'm doing. The situation's not in control of what I'm doing. So that stillness represents your competence, your confidence, your self-assuredness, et cetera, and communicates a huge amount of stuff to other people. So, yeah, there's this interesting thing about just sitting still and paying attention, and not you're not actually trying to do anything. Yeah. I mean, just in general, what people like romantically is people what makes people look attractive. And you'll notice this once I say this. One of the things that makes people look attractive is when they're really good at something and you see them doing that thing. Like for example, a lot of Olympic athletes are not particularly good looking, right? But when you see them doing something where they're really good at that thing, you go, "Wow, look at that person." So again, I'm saying all this uh, because it is actually important, regardless, to become aware of the sorts of things that your mind is doing unconsciously at the moment that you could be doing consciously instead. But there's all sorts of things, not just for romance, but it's important if you're living in the real world to have a certain amount of ability to talk to people in general. So if you want to be able to talk to people in general, there are skills that are involved in that. It's not just a random do whatever you want kind of thing. There are skills you can develop that work in general with people. Like I'll give you one small example. If you're with somebody and you don't know them, before you launch into a whole bunch of stuff about you, you just say, uh, "Tell me about yourself. What do you do?" "Oh, that's interesting." And then they mention something and you go, "Oh, tell me more about that part. What is that?" "Wow, I hadn't heard of that." "So wait, you guys do this and this?" "Wow, that's interesting." And you'll start to get a sense. through this kind of conversation, which they'll find interesting because now you're asking about them and everybody likes talking about themselves, you'll start to get a sense of whether or not there's chemistry there building in the conversation. And if there is, carry on. And if there's not, then you can say, "Oh, well, it was lovely to meet you," and care and move on yourself, right? And so you can start to feel comfortable that you have a set of skills that allow you to navigate social things. And if it turns out that you meet somebody that you like, you have a whole set of skills for interacting with people that allow you to have a nice interaction. And if there's something to be pursued there in both directions, that you have the skills to see it through. And if there's not something to pursue there, then no problem. It's not like you've struck out with the entire world. There's just not a connection there, which is not a big deal actually. Okay. So one of my teachers, for those of you who are sort of wondering why I'm spending so much time on this particular point. Oh, I skipped a question. Sorry. Earth, sweet and sour. Hello. Sorry, I missed you coming in. Let me see. Earth. Ah, the olfactory sense gate. Yes. Okay, I'll come right back to that. Okay, so in regards to your social competence, there are a handful of practical skills you can gain that allow you to interact with people in a good way in general. And you may say, well, what does this have to do with mind training? What does this have to do with meditation, etc.? If you don't in living in the real world, again, if you're not living in a cave, you need to have skills for interacting with other people so that things can go better. You need to be able to manage conflict. You need to be able to manage getting to know someone. You need to be able to manage friendships. You need to be able to manage relationships with family. And there are tools actually even in the Buddhist canon for lay people where the Buddha talks about this sort of thing, where he talks about developing friendships, he talks about relations with family, he talks about husband and wife, parent and child, employer and employee, employee and employer, both directions, right? So even in the Buddhist canon, that for lay people, some attention is paid to this. So yeah, the overall point is, if you want to, not just for the sake of finding a mate that you like, for having a partner that you like, but for yourself also, here's a great tip. Okay, people are attracted to people that are doing something and they're passionate about something. Now, not everyone will be attracted to the thing that you're passionate about, but if you put a huge amount of time and energy into something you actually care about, develop skill in that area, blah, 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 and develop some basic social skills by reading the books on this thing, following the podcasts on that kind of stuff, blah, 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 so that you can become a normal, competent person in the world, which is harder than ever because everyone is basically doing everything online now and never talks to anyone, right? But if you have those skills, it makes you really stand out. The thing that is most attractive to people, besides just, the normal stuff that everyone sort of looks for, which is somewhat genetic and somewhat sort of indicators of health, right? Indicators of health make you attractive at a biological level. I mean, that's to sort of boil it down. We're mammals. We look at other mammals and we go, "Oh, that one's attractive because they look really healthy. They look like they could produce more mammals." All right. So that's one aspect. But if you have skills to be able to interact with other people and you have something you're passionate about, these are it's like a magnetic lure that brings people to you. You don't have to go out of your way usually to seek other people out unless what you're doing is quite niche. If you're into something and you're really into it, other people turn up and they're like, "Hey, that's really cool. Tell me about that." And then whatever it is that you're attracted to in terms of having a partner or a mate, those people turn up too. Or you turn up where they happen to be because now you're in the places where those people go. So just go actually do stuff in the real world that you care about and that you think is interesting, and you'll meet people that are like you and are interested in the stuff you're interested in, and become really competent, really capable in those things. And then spend time actually developing the social skills that allow you to interact with anyone with some degree of smoothness. So that if you meet somebody who's 50 years old and knows a lot more about stuff than you do, you can say, "Hey, tell me about that. What is this? Oh, this is interesting. What about this and this and this? Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, tell me more. Oh, I never heard of that. What is that?" Right? And just gaining some fluidity in your ability to show interest in other people and exchange information and create new friendships. These are skills. These are skills. They're not something that everyone has innately. Some people develop them growing up because they have big families or whatever, but they're skills. So if you have those skills, you will be comfortable talking to other people most of the time because you know what to do. You're not like, what the hell do I do? What do I say? Where do I put my hands? How do I stand? Do I lean on this thing? Do I not lean? Should I put my hands in my pockets? Like all the stupid stuff we think. You should have sorted all that out ahead of time. uh, Yeah, I mean, great point, Oates. Quite often older people, if you talk to older people and listen to the way that they interact with each other, quite often they already have these skills because, you know, everybody talked to everybody. Everybody talked to everybody in the past, and that's how you got stuff done. So talk to your elders more, and then just notice how they talk. When an older person meets someone new, listen to what they do when they meet them. Now, sometimes they just drone on about their own stuff, and that person wants to get the hell away from there as quickly as they can, as you know, right? Sometimes they go, "Oh, tell me about what you do. Tell me about this. Oh, that's interesting. What about these two things? Oh, you've heard about those two. Well, tell me what you know about those two things. That's really interesting. I'm interested in those two things too." And then they tell you what they know about those two things, and then they go, "Well, you said you know about those two things too. What do you know about it?" And now you're talking. And they're engaged because they asked the question. You see what I mean? So it's not mysterious. There's techniques because we're pattern creating, pattern living creatures. you know. And so if you're comfortable, you will be more interesting to other people. Usually, unless you're super arrogant like myself, and then nobody wants to spend time around you. Okay, rumination. Yes, okay, we covered that. In a concentrated state, well, your negative emotions can make your mind very concentrated also. So concentration, it has to be samma samadhi, not just samadhi. It has to be the right kind of concentration, coming about for the right kinds of reasons. So it's worth thinking about a bit. Okay. Earth Wombat asks, can you talk about the olfactory sense gate? Unlike light and sound, I've always thought your receptors need to come in contact with odor. Yes. Yes. Okay. With vision, right now on this screen, the screen is emitting photons. The photons hit your eyeball. Your mind processes the angle and the wavelength of the light that came in, combines it with all sorts of information, and then generates what you're seeing. This is the mental image. This is all the mental image. This isn't the world. This is what your mind has created based upon the eyeball being stimulated and mixing it with a whole bunch of stuff from your mind. Expectation, memory, language, a whole bunch of things. So that's what you're seeing when you see. Likewise, hearing, same way. Sound waves, pressure waves come through the air, and they come through the air in my non-scientific understanding, that it hits your eardrum and vibrates at different frequencies, and there's a little bone inside your ear, and it vibrates, or there's a few little bones. I can't remember exactly how it works. In any case, those little vibrations get picked up by vibration sensitive instruments, roughly speaking, inside your ear. And then those are once again combined with a whole bunch of stuff inside your mind, and out pops my voice. So what you're hearing is not my voice. What you're hearing is basically a mental image of my voice. Similarly, taste. You put something in the mouth, the chemicals separate in the saliva mostly, and those chemicals then come into contact with the taste buds, and then your expectations, blah blah blah, and some of your smell information gets transformed into an image of taste. Similarly, with the smell, through the air, little particles are floating in. You inhale those little particles, it hits little receptors in there, and apparently, I think we have, like, someone correct me, but I think we have, I can't remember if it's 300 or if it's 3,000 or 5,000. We have a huge number of receptors for different kinds of smells in our nose. So these little particles hit little receptors. That information is interpreted, filtered, and combined with all sorts of information, and then fed to us as a smell. So, in terms of welcome, DJ, coming in the room like a cannonball. So, in terms of the practice, though, of the opening the olfactory gate, think about sound, because we did sound recently. Behind you right now, or above you or below you, in some direction, there's not very much sound, or there's no sound. So if you take your awareness and you imagine that you've heard something in that direction, right? Just imagine, like like late at night, sometimes it's totally quiet, and then you hear something that sounds weird, right? From a direction you didn't expect, like through the wall or through the floor or through the ceiling or something, and you go, what is that? But the sound stops and it doesn't happen again, which is super creepy. You know what I'm talking about? But in any case, you point your awareness of sound in a direction where there's no sound. So you can point the awareness there even when there's nothing there to be aware of. Okay? So likewise, with smell, to open the olfactory gate means that you're learning how to, for lack of the words to say it in a way that doesn't sound strange, you're learning how to point your smell forward, backward, left, right, up, down, 6 directions, open. It doesn't matter if you're breathing in, doesn't matter if you're breathing out, doesn't matter if you're smelling something, doesn't matter if you're not smelling something. Just like with hearing, when you pointed it upwards or downwards, there's nothing there to hear. Nonetheless, you pointed that way so that the hearing is primed and ready to hear something below you or above you, if something happens to appear there to be heard. Likewise, even though we're entirely trained to only smell things when we are breathing in and right when we're breathing in, you're not training the olfactory awareness that way. You're training it so that that awareness is opened and primed and ready to smell something in 6 directions, whether you're breathing in or out, or you're in between the breaths. Doesn't rely on the breath at all. Doesn't rely upon you smelling something at that moment at all. Likewise, taste doesn't depend at all on you tasting something at that very moment. You're just opening that awareness and priming it ready. It is ready to taste something in that direction, in this direction, in these directions, in these directions. Whatever happens to appear there, that awareness is fully open in every direction to taste immediately whatever happens to appear in terms of taste. Just like the awareness late at night when you hear something above you, you point it upward and it's fully ready to hear whatever the next thing above you is. Even though you're not hearing anything at the time, you just go, what is that? And you're waiting. You're waiting ready to hear above you. Likewise, you open the olfactory awareness in 6 directions, and it is waiting ready to smell something if it happens to appear, regardless of what the breath is doing or what, and regardless of whether or not there's something to smell. And most of the time, there won't be anything to smell. Right. Okay. Let's see what's happening in the chat. Lots of weirdness in the chat. Non reactivity can appear confident and in control. Yes, but ideally, you don't want to appear that way. I'm just saying one of the side effects of actually training is that you seem more self assured. And there is I think, a wider range of people, human beings, who are interested in someone who is self assured, comfortable, and especially if they're able to interact in a normal human way, without fumbling the ball too much. Then you become an interesting person and an enjoyable person to spend time with and talk to, which means that you have more options in terms of the types of partners that you might end up with in the long run, which should make sense, right? Because if you don't know how to interact with people, now your options have gone from all of these people down to the ones who don't care that you don't know how to interact with normal human beings. And if your emotions are out of control, and this would have been the range of possibilities of people who would have been interested because you don't have one of the weird emotional things that they don't like, right? This would have been them. But now it's been limited down to the range of people who can deal with the fact that you're a really angry person, or you're a really arrogant person, or you're a really like unbelievably lustful person, or whatever, whatever, whatever. Now you can only really be successful in your romantic life and partnership life with people who can deal with the absolutely out of control issue that you happen to have. Or the fact that you don't know how to talk to anyone. See what I mean? So gaining more capability internally widens the field out and allows you to have more options in terms of your romantic life, if that's part of your interests. But again, it's a side effect of the process. In terms of the internal capabilities you've gained, that's a side effect. But as a lay practitioner living in the real world, you also need to develop social skills that allow you to talk to people in your work, in your family, in your romantic life, in your friendship groups. When you meet new people, you need to develop the skills to interact with people and know what to do when you talk to people. If you don't have those skills, then uh, everything else will be harder in the real world. And as I talk about so many times, I hope this doesn't sound too preachy, my friends, but if you don't know how to interact with people in the real world and do stuff and be relatively competent in the real world, then everything else in your practice is going to be harder. Because if you can't get your career to advance and you're stuck and you're frustrated and you absolutely hate your life because it's not going where you want it to go, now you have to struggle against this BS that you've created to do your practice every day. On the other hand, if you're competent and your emotions are under control and you can do the stuff you need to do at work and blah blah blah, now the likelihood you're going to advance through your career becomes higher. And if that's higher, now there's going to be less BS to deal with in this area of your real life that you can't avoid. You can't avoid the fact that you're going to have to make money. Therefore, when you get back to your cushion, you're not having to deal with all of this crunchy, sharp nonsense that happened over here because there isn't any, or there's less. Same thing in your romantic life. If you have the skills to deal with conflict in particular, and to deal with the close quarters stuff you deal with if you're in close relationships with people, if you have skills to deal with that are normal, conventional, totally conventional kinds of skills, then you have the ability to not have this be chaotic and insane and difficult to deal with most of the time, which means that your romantic life is conflicting less with your ability to do all your practices. So, same thing, family. If you have skills in being able to interact with your family, your friends, blah 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 blah, onwards and onwards and onwards. The more skill you have in managing your affairs in the real world, the easier it will be to do your practices when it comes time to do your practices. So these aren't unrelated issues. This is to circle back finally. This is why I'm spending so much time on it. Okay, let's see before we do a little practice tonight. Yes. In brief, training concentration. So Casey, don't try to do anything artificial in your head. Actually buy the books, go to the listen to the podcast, blah 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 blah. Become an actually competent social person who knows how to interact with other people. Read the books, listen to the podcasts, listen to the influencer people that are actually good at this, and learn how it is that people who are successful interacting with other people and do that really well and charm people and make people like them and make people feel comfortable around them. Learn what those skills are because they are relatively universal. They're not absolutely universal, but like 90% or so probably of people like the same stuff. Believe it or not, the same basic stuff. And then we build all sorts of intricacies and details and things we like, but mostly the baseline is the same stuff. So if you learn just the basic skills of being able to interact with people and talk to people, there will be less fear because you know what to do. You're afraid because you don't know what to do and you want the outcome to be a certain thing and you don't know how to create that outcome. You want them to be your friends first. You want to go up to people and talk to them and have them like you first. And you want to then be able to suss out and discover, is there something more that's worth having here with this person or not first, right? So develop the actual skills that allow you to do that, and they're not mysterious, right? They are very well understood in the world of, the reason that uh so many politicians, for example, I hate to use this example right before we do our practice because people don't like talking about politics, but the reason that so many politicians, for example, have gestures like this is because this feels nice somehow. This feels comfortable somehow for your mind in a way that this doesn't feel comfortable. Isn't that interesting? Like, just if I start going like this, even though I'm talking the same tone of voice, all of a sudden it feels a little bit less comfortable in the room, doesn't it? It's weird. But if I go like this, stupid detail. Why are we like this? Why are we like this? That all I have to do is go like this, and now all of a sudden it seems like somehow slightly more comfortable. Our minds are so stupid and weird about little tiny things that don't matter that much at the end of the day. But this gesture, for some reason, makes people feel comfortable and makes them feel like you're making a good point about something. Or this gesture, if you're Italian. Anyways, so again, there's just a million tiny details like this, but the baseline of what makes people feel comfortable and feel good and the skills you need to get to know people, you can probably figure that out like within a month and start working on those skills and get better at them. And then once you're good at those things, you'll feel comfortable going up to people that you don't know and talking to them and getting to know them. And everything else will come out of that. You don't have to actively pursue something. Something will evolve out of the fact that you're actually getting to know people and you like them and they like you, right? This is how it should happen. Okay. Purple. Oh, John Connor has come to let us know that the Terminator is going to get us. Okay. Purple guy. What do you think about Buddhists being involved in political movements? I assume lay people are fine. that you cannot demonize the other side. Yeah, I mean, I've never seen like, I mean, besides Burma, I've never seen a full-on Buddhist movement. Burma and I think Bhutan. Oh, Jewish influencers? Dude, what are you talking about? Are you in the right room? I mean, let me just tell you. I was one of the most awkward young people you can imagine. It was so difficult for me to figure out how to talk to people, how to get to know people, et cetera, et cetera. So I bled over this issue for years. And I can tell you for a fact, it's not a matter of keeping up with all the stuff. It is not at all a matter of keeping up with all the stuff. It's not at all a matter of being trendy. If you're amongst your peers, it can help to know some of the stuff that your peers know in terms of popular culture or whatever. But the skills that are the basic skills of getting to know someone are the same. And the basic skills of knowing what to do with yourself so that you're comfortable and you're doing your best at least to make other people comfortable without being neurotic because that makes people uncomfortable, right? These are relatively universal skills. I don't know what the number is, but probably 95% of people, unless they have something else going on, through interacting with in the ways that have been proven to allow you to do this, you can very easily make other people feel comfortable and start to get to know them and those are really important skills to have if you live in the real world. And yes, you absolutely can get them by reading books and by talking to influencer people who have spent a lot of time thinking about these things and reading those books and doing this very successfully in the real world. So I think this is very much worth doing if you're a layperson. It's one of maybe like five things that you should have in your tool belt as a person who wants to do practice in the real world because it will make everything else you're trying to do easier to know how to interact with people and to know how to interact with people and to know how to manage conflict and so forth. Very important. Try being a comfortable woman beater and expressing that. Who is this guy? John, I really wish you the best, man. I don't know what's going on in your life, but truly I wish you the best. I hope that things go better for you. Clearly they're not going great right now. Okay, friends, let's do some practice and then I believe, let me double check. I've got to jump off to do a phone call with somebody who can help the old man fix all the sound equipment. Okay, let's just do a quick, let's just do a quick, that's going to get distracting. So I'm gonna put John in timeout. We can't handle the Terminator tonight. Sorry, John. Skynet going to win. Gonna win this one. Okay, friends, let's do just some intensive breath. I think this was a good conversation. It will be supportive of meditation. No, he's not banned. I just put him on silent mode, so he's still here. He can hear everything. He's just not going to be distracting while we're while we're trying to do our practice. No more Jewish space lasers and whatever else. Jewish space lasers and woman beaters. Yeah. I've never banned anyone. But I do silence people sometimes if we're trying to do other things. You know, not every bit of commentary is helpful for the current activity. Okay. So let's do some intensive breath. We'll just do one session. So I think most of the people here know the instructions for this. So just place your mind on the breath, and you're going to place it there with great force, great intensity, and you're going to count from 1 to 7, 7 to 0 in between the out breath and the in breath. All right. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, begin. Okay. So I know it was a little bit shorter in terms of practice today, but we actually covered some good ground. We did a short rumination on the faults of anger, short intensive breath meditation, and I think hopefully a meaningful talk for some in the room related to having the skills that allow you to just have a conventionally functional life. And, some of the side effects of that sort of thing might be that if you're young, as Casey is, if you're young and you're looking for romantic partners and so forth, one of the side effects of just becoming a more competent person who can talk to people and get to know people and make friends and all of this, because those skills are relatively universal kinds of skills. One of the side effects of gaining those, which is something you need to have if you'd like your life to run a little more smoothly, which will support your practice. One of the side effects is that yes, when you're looking for a romantic partner for long-term commitment and so forth, having those skills is quite helpful. You know. Okay, my friends, good to see you. Good to have you. I need to hop off because I told someone I'd get on the phone with them tonight after class. So, thank you so much for being here. As usual, hope to see you again soon. Try not to die before I do. I'm Dr. Jared Jones.